Meghan turned 45 years old this week, and the internet got exactly what it's genuinely come to expect from these particular occasions. Balloons, dancing footage, elaborate desserts, carefully composed garden content. All of it time-stamped and released in a fairly rapid, coordinated sequence. Buckingham Palace responded with a single, unmistakable message. Nothing at all. No post, no photograph, no warm line from Charles, no polite acknowledgement from William and Catherine. Just silence. The kind that doesn't need to say anything cruel to land as a statement anyway. And that specific silence, considerably more than any individual piece of content Meghan actually posted that day, is genuinely what I want to work through carefully tonight, because I think the public reaction to it reveals something considerably more interesting about where public perception of this entire situation currently sits.
Oh no, what a shame. What a shame. Here I was preparing a special episode of the show to mark Meghan Markle's 45th birthday.
Let's genuinely start with the palace's side of this specific situation, because there's a fair and entirely legitimate explanation readily available here that deserves proper consideration before we move into anything considerably more skeptical or suspicious. Royal commentators have reportedly pointed out that official palace social accounts generally don't post birthday tributes for every private family member, and Harry, Meghan, and their children have technically sat outside that specific public birthday convention for years now, ever since stepping back from working royal duties.
I think it's just their desperate need to always seem to be out there and posting how wonderfully fun they are. You know, pictures of that, a clip of that, her jumping into a swimming pool, you know, that their life is just full of fun.
Under that reading, nobody deliberately snubbed her. The institution was simply following an existing, consistently applied protocol rather than making any specific decision about Meghan personally. That's a genuinely reasonable and fairly common explanation across similar royal institutions, and it genuinely deserves real, substantial weight before jumping to assume anything considerably more calculated or personally targeted was actually happening behind the scenes here. Institutions that manage genuinely large-scale public communications at this level typically do operate on fairly rigid, carefully pre-established rules governing exactly who gets acknowledged publicly and under precisely what circumstances, specifically and deliberately designed to avoid the exact kind of speculation and controversy this particular situation has ended up generating regardless.
This birthday, this 45th birthday, has turned into an absolute disaster for Meghan Markle, with two pieces of news that could destroy her. First, she's been caught ripping off her social media videos again. Second, massive development in this Prince Harry court case that could actually end up costing Harry and Meghan millions and millions of pounds.
What genuinely complicates that otherwise clean, tidy institutional explanation, though, is the very specific and particular public position that Meghan continues to occupy publicly. Several years into her post-royal life, she still uses the Duchess of Sussex title consistently and prominently across essentially every public context, in interviews, in her ongoing business branding, and in major public announcements connected to her various commercial projects. She remains married to a direct son of the reigning king, and remains, by any formal royal definition still technically in effect, the mother of a genuine prince and princess regardless of anyone's current working status within the institution. So even in a scenario where the silence genuinely does reflect consistent, evenly applied institutional policy rather than any kind of personal decision aimed specifically at her, the resulting optics of that same policy landing on someone who continues to actively and openly benefit commercially from her ongoing royal connection are genuinely considerably harder to read as entirely neutral or free of any deeper meaning.
Meghan Markle's incessant need to copy other people, from Diana to the Princess of Wales to other celebrities like Pamela Anderson, Gwyneth Paltrow, Meghan Markle seems to lack one very key thing in the public's eye. And that is a defined identity, from her fashion to her personality to her interests. Everything about Meghan seems to be a copy of somebody else because she lacks an inherent identity on her own.
It's worth adding one more layer of fairness to this specific institutional question, too. Royal households across Europe generally maintain fairly strict, long-standing conventions about which family members receive official public acknowledgement and under what specific circumstances. And those conventions have historically applied with real consistency, even to blood relatives who remain formally titled but no longer perform official duties. reading this specific silence as uniquely targeted at Meghan, rather than as the predictable outcome of a policy that would presumably apply the same way to any similarly positioned family member, requires assuming a level of personal intent that the available evidence doesn't necessarily confirm on its own.
Well, super sleuth Nancy Sidley is on to her, revealing this was a big fat copy of the online trad wife Nara Smith, who had posted an almost identical video of wildflowers, and as Sidley pointed out, right on cue, Meghan Markle dropped what she described as the Temu version.
Whatever the actual institutional reasoning genuinely was behind it, the practical result played out the same regardless. The palace moved through the entire day without any public acknowledgement whatsoever, and Meghan responded in precisely the way she's built her entire post-royal public career, around responding to moments like this, by turning her own platforms into the primary self-directed source of visibility for the occasion. The resulting content arrived quickly and in genuinely substantial volume across multiple platforms simultaneously, all landing within a fairly tightly compressed overall window of time. There was striking footage of Meghan mid-air, leaping enthusiastically into a swimming pool in a black swimsuit beside a cluster of birthday balloons, an image very clearly engineered and composed to communicate carefree, celebratory, joyful energy above all else.
And Meghan Markle, she's tried to be Gwyneth Paltrow. I don't think Gwyneth Paltrow wants anything to do with her. But basically, when you're a sociopath, in my opinion, you're just an amalgamation and a reflection of everyone around you, right? She became what she thought Harry wanted, and she really tried to cosplay Princess Diana and win over Prince Harry. And now she's trying to act like she's a chef, and she's this Oprah, Martha Stewart, Mother Goop, Gwyneth Paltrow figure. None of it is really working.
There was also a separate video of her dancing energetically through a large, well-appointed kitchen, with dogs moving through the background of the frame, presented throughout as spontaneous, unplanned joy, rather than anything remotely formally staged or rehearsed in advance. I want to be genuinely fair here before moving into the more critical assessment, because there's genuinely nothing inherently wrong, on its own face, with someone celebrating their own significant birthday enthusiastically, and choosing to share that celebration publicly across their own social platforms.
And none of it is particularly working particularly well. And what she has done here, I think, is just so incredibly fundamentally flawed in terms of the image she's trying to project. Now, of course, her fans will love it. You know, some lay people might like or enjoy it. And even if you think, hey, this isn't the worst thing, it's not in a way, but it's the cosplay again.
Plenty of people, famous and otherwise, document meaningful personal milestones for an audience without generating any real controversy at all, and the basic impulse to create a lasting, joyful record of a milestone birthday isn't remotely suspicious on its own terms. Plenty of public figures do exactly this without generating controversy, and the impulse to create a joyful, well-produced record of a meaningful birthday isn't inherently suspicious. What generated real scrutiny here specifically was the volume and precision of it, arriving in the exact vacuum the palace's silence had created. One panel discussing the kitchen footage reportedly posed a fair question worth sitting with. Why did this particular moment need to be filmed and shared at all, rather than simply lived privately?
But Link, don't you think there's something quite sad about the fact, 45 years old, you know, that is, I'm 43, you should be very content at that age, very happy about where you're at with life, very confident in your friendship groups and your career. And Meghan had the opportunity for all of that. And actually what we're seeing today is just a trickle. No one really wants to acknowledge this. No one really wants to celebrate her. She's probably going to end up having to celebrate herself.
Their read was that the volume of content read less like organic celebration and more like a deliberate campaign to visually assert that everything in this specific life is thriving, precisely at the moment an outside institution had declined to make that same assertion on her behalf. It's also worth naming a genuine counterpoint before moving forward. Performing joy on camera isn't automatically evidence that the underlying joy is fake. Plenty of genuinely happy people also happen to enjoy documenting and sharing that happiness, and the existence of a camera doesn't inherently corrupt the authenticity of what's being captured. The skepticism here isn't really about whether celebration and content creation can coexist genuinely. It's specifically about the volume and precision arriving at exactly this particular moment, which is a fair thing to notice without concluding that every single frame was necessarily hollow underneath.
So she's like, I'm going to celebrate my birthday. And then splashing in, thank you for the birthday love. I mean, honestly, I feel like that's so weird that public people think we give a crap about their birthday. Now, I understand with the royal family because they actually reflect, they work for the people, and they always post the picture and then react later to the kind messages. I feel like this is presumptuous because it's like, number one, people can't comment on your Instagram. So how do they know how do you know they're giving you birthday love?
If this kind of balanced breakdown is genuinely useful to you, the like button honestly helps this channel keep doing exactly this kind of careful work, rather than simply picking one obvious side and running with it for easy engagement. Here's where things got genuinely more complicated though, because several individual pieces of content generated their own separate controversies beyond the general two-staged critique. First, the dessert video. Meghan reportedly demonstrated a sundae built from vanilla ice cream layered with her own as-ever raspberry spread, crushed shortbread, more spread, and the brand's signature edible flower garnish, functioning essentially as a product demonstration dressed as a birthday treat. That's a fairly ordinary marketing move for someone running a lifestyle brand, and worth noting as such rather than treating brand promotion itself as scandalous. What generated actual mockery was a separate detail. In another shot from the same general content, Meghan reportedly appeared holding a plain ice cream cone, with no trace of the elaborate branded sundae she'd just spent an entire video assembling and promoting. Viewers picked up on the inconsistency quickly. If the product was genuinely her preferred way to celebrate, why does the unguarded, presumably more casual moment show her reaching for something entirely different? It's a small detail, but small inconsistencies like this tend to generate outsized skepticism, specifically because they undercut the authenticity a lifestyle brand depends on. Then there's As Ever itself, which reportedly published its own tribute post celebrating its founder's birthday. On one level, that's simply a company acknowledging a milestone for the person who built it, genuinely unremarkable in most commercial contexts. What made it land awkwardly here specifically was the timing and contrast. A commercial entity Meghan herself created was publicly celebrating her on the exact day the royal institution she's still formally connected to declined to do the same. That juxtaposition, genuine family silence beside manufactured brand enthusiasm, is what generated the sharper commentary, not the tribute itself in isolation. There's a broader industry context worth including here too, because it applies well beyond just this one controversy. Genuine product placement and lifestyle brand promotion woven into what appears to be spontaneous personal content has become genuinely standard practice across influencer culture broadly, well beyond anyone connected to this specific family. The specific criticism here isn't really about whether commercial content exists inside a personal celebration. That's expected practice at this point for essentially anyone running a brand alongside a public platform. The sharper criticism is about the specific inconsistency of promoting a product enthusiastically in one frame while apparently choosing something else entirely in another, which is a considerably narrower and more legitimate point than a blanket objection to commercial content existing at all. Now, the garden video, because this is genuinely where things escalated into a separate and considerably more contested controversy. Meghan reportedly posted footage of herself moving through a wildflower garden, selecting and cutting stems, then arranging them into a bouquet indoors, styled with the kind of slow, intentionally unpolished aesthetic that's become common across lifestyle content generally. Viewers quickly noted strong similarities to earlier content from influencer Nara Smith, who'd previously posted a video with a nearly identical structure and visual language: planting, selecting blooms, carrying them inside, arranging them with the same unhurried, softly lit presentation. I want to be genuinely fair here, because this specific accusation deserves more scrutiny than it initially received online. Nobody owns the general concept of filming yourself arranging garden flowers. It's become an extremely common genre across lifestyle content broadly, with countless creators producing videos that share the same basic visual language independent of each other. Similarity in format doesn't automatically prove direct copying, and it's entirely possible both videos emerged from the same broader aesthetic trend, rather than one deliberately imitating the other. What made this particular instance land as suspiciously as it did wasn't the flowers themselves, it was context. Meghan has previously drawn comparisons to several other established lifestyle figures across her various projects, and this wasn't being evaluated as an isolated incident, but as one more entry in an accumulating pattern that's generated real public skepticism about how much of her current output feels genuinely original versus assembled from other successful formulas. That pattern matters more than any single video, because Meghan's entire post-royal commercial identity depends heavily on authenticity as the core selling point. The promise that audiences are seeing her actual life, actual home, actual preferences, rather than a curated performance borrowed from elsewhere. When that authenticity gets questioned repeatedly across multiple separate pieces of content, it cuts considerably deeper into the brand's foundation than isolated criticism of any single video ever could. It's genuinely worth adding that the entire genre of slow, aesthetically composed lifestyle content, the soft lighting, the unhurried movement through a garden or kitchen, the sense of curated but supposedly effortless domesticity, has become so widespread across social media broadly that near-identical structural choices between creators who've never interacted with each other happen constantly, simply because everyone in this space is drawing from the same general aesthetic playbook that's proven successful. That context doesn't fully resolve the specific comparison being drawn here, but it's a genuinely important piece of the picture that deserves inclusion rather than treating every structural similarity as evidence of direct, deliberate imitation. Now let's get to the specific moment that generated by far the most attention out of this entire birthday, because I think it genuinely deserves careful, honest handling rather than either quick dismissal or an uncritical pile-on in either direction. The pool photograph, Meghan suspended mid-air, entering the water in a black swimsuit, was reportedly intended as the signature image of the entire birthday celebration. It's genuinely a striking, well-composed photograph on its own merits. Shortly after it circulated, though, users online reportedly located an older photograph of Princess Diana captured in a strikingly similar pose, jumping into a pool with comparable body positioning and framing. I want to handle this specific comparison with real care, because there's a meaningful difference between reasonable observation and reaching for controversy. Diana remains one of the most extensively photographed women in modern history across decades of public life, in countless settings and poses. The statistical likelihood that any woman photographed jumping into a pool would eventually produce an image bearing some resemblance to at least one Diana photograph, purely by coincidence, is genuinely fairly high. That's simply a function of how much visual material exists from Diana's public life to compare against. That said, timing matters here, and it's worth being honest about it. This specific comparison arrived after the garden video controversy, after the sundae inconsistency, after the branded content had already generated accusations of overproduction, meaning the pool photograph landed inside an existing narrative rather than in isolation. Whether that timing reflects genuine, deliberate visual referencing on Meghan's part, or simply an unfortunate coincidence arriving at the worst possible moment for how it would be received, is genuinely something reasonable people can disagree about without either position being obviously correct. What's genuinely fair to say, regardless of anyone's actual underlying intent, is that the specific comparison generated real, sustained traction across multiple platforms, with some commentary framing it fairly aggressively as Meghan deliberately reaching for Diana's specific visual legacy rather than simply existing within a broadly similar aesthetic tradition purely by coincidence. I genuinely think that specific framing, the suggestion of deliberate, calculated emotional appropriation of a beloved historical figure's image, goes considerably further than the currently available evidence can actually support with any real confidence, and deserves to be treated openly and honestly as speculation rather than presented as established, confirmed fact. However genuinely compelling the raw visual similarity between the two photographs happens to be on its own. It's worth naming, too, that public visual comparisons between Meghan and Diana have circulated for years across countless separate contexts, clothing choices, poses, event settings, with commentators regularly noting similarities regardless of whether any specific instance actually involves deliberate reference. That extended history matters for how this particular photograph got received, because it arrived into an audience already primed, after years of similar comparisons, to notice and immediately flag any resemblance, which likely amplified the reaction here well beyond what a single isolated comparison would have generated in a genuine vacuum. So where does all of this actually leave the broader picture of exactly how this particular birthday unfolded, once you set the most dramatic individual claims aside and look at the fuller context surrounding each one? I genuinely think the fairest, most honest overall read here is roughly this. The palace's silence throughout the day, whether it was purely policy-driven or something considerably more pointed and deliberate, created a genuine, unmistakable public vacuum around what should have otherwise been a fairly ordinary family milestone. Meghan responded by filling that specific vacuum with a genuinely substantial volume of content across multiple platforms, some of which read as perfectly ordinary, entirely defensible birthday celebration by any reasonable standard, and some of which genuinely generated legitimate scrutiny once examined closely and carefully. The ice cream inconsistency between the promotional footage and the more casual moment, the garden video's structural similarity to existing, previously published content from another creator, and the commercial brand tribute arriving publicly alongside continued conspicuous family silence. The Diana photograph comparison sits in a genuinely different category entirely from all of that other content, striking and immediately noticeable as a pure visual coincidence regardless of intent, but treated in a considerable amount of surrounding commentary, with far more confident certainty about deliberate underlying intent than the actual available evidence genuinely supports on its own merits. None of this genuinely proves that Meghan has no real happiness in her actual life, no real audience genuinely engaged with what she shares, or no authentic personal connection to any of the specific things she chose to post throughout this particular day. What it genuinely does suggest, though, is that a celebration explicitly designed and produced to demonstrate effortless, natural joy ended up generating, instead, a considerable wave of public scrutiny, specifically about how much of it was actually effortless in any meaningful sense versus how much was carefully constructed and strategically timed to compensate for an institutional absence that apparently couldn't be directly addressed or challenged through any other available channel. What do you genuinely think? Does the palace's continued silence throughout this entire day actually reflect genuinely consistent, evenly applied institutional policy? Or does the specific timing and broader context here suggest something considerably more pointed and deliberate than simple, routine protocol being followed as usual? And separately, on the specific Diana Poole photograph comparison, does that genuinely read to you as reasonable coincidence given just how extensively photographed Diana was across her entire public life? Or does something about it feel more deliberate once you factor in everything else that had already surrounded this particular birthday by the time that specific image circulated? Let me know your genuinely honest take on all of this down in the comments below. I read every single response, and they genuinely do help shape which stories we choose to dig into next on this channel going forward. And if you genuinely appreciate breakdowns like this one, the kind that actually try to hold multiple fair readings in view simultaneously rather than simply picking whichever version generates the most dramatic reaction, go ahead and subscribe to Palace Insider right now so you catch the very next one the moment it drops. And if tonight's video gave you something genuinely worth sitting with, whether or not you ended up agreeing with every single point, drop a like on your way out before you go. It genuinely helps this channel keep growing and reaching more people who care about getting the fuller, fairer picture rather than just the loudest headline version.